Here's a very short history of early geometry. Geometry was supposed to have started about 3,000 years ago with two groups, one being the Babylonians. Now, the Babylonians lived in the Middle East, not too far from the Egyptians, and they introduced the idea of zero. Actually, the Babylonians, I understand, live in present-day Iraq. The other thing they did is they introduced the base 60 number system. They picked 60 because it was divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a lot of other numbers. So that's where we get 60 seconds and 60 minutes. They also found a relationship between the diameter of a circle and the circumference, and they estimated pi at 3, and later at 3 1/8. They saw a relationship between similar triangles, but they weren't so good at the angles in the triangles. They couldn't measure them. The Egyptians are the other group who were working on geometry about the same time. Now, when you think of Egyptians, you think of the pyramids, and that would be a very good thing to think of for geometry. They were experts at construction and surveying, and they were very good at triangles. As you can see, a pyramid is a tetrahedron, which is like a square pyramid. So one thing they did is they created the area formula for a triangle. You might remember that formula because you learned it in 6th grade. They also discovered volume for a rectangular prism and a cylinder, and they approximated pi. So in summary, the ancients were the Babylonians and Egyptians, and the main thing they did was pi, but they also used it it was very practical back then. Now, the Greeks got a little away from the practical. They started to think more, how do we have a system here? So Thales is actually a fantastic mathematician. He was the first to use deductive reasoning, and he used proofs. He was also the first to do indirect measurement, which we will be talking about in the spring semester using trigonometry and geometry. So he actually measured the height of the pyramids by using similar triangles and proportions. So Thales used deductive reasoning, indirect measurement, and proportions, all very important tools for our next mathematician, Pythagoras. Now, Pythagoras is probably one of the most famous of the mathematicians. He even had a school, a very secret society and brotherhood. He also visited Egypt, and the Egyptians already knew about the sides of right triangles. So they had discovered Pythagorean triples, like a 3, 4, 5, and some of the other special triangles. What Pythagoras did is that he proved that the a squared plus b squared equals c squared is true for any right triangle. So he was able to do it for non-whole numbers. The only problem is Pythagoras didn't like irrational numbers, numbers that couldn't be written as a ratio or fraction. And what they discovered with his theorem, the square root of 2, which is irrational, and they apparently drowned one of the people at sea who said, "I'm going to tell the world." So sadly, this is a common legend that it led to the murder. Now, Euclid, for us, is a very important person. You'll see him a lot more on your quizzes and tests. He is considered the father of geometry. He developed the axiomatic system, which uses axioms, also known as postulates, things we know are true, to prove things that we think are true, like theorems. He had 5 basic postulates, and he put the system together in 13 volumes called the Elements. So these poor students had to study all 13 volumes, and geometry was one of the main things they studied besides music. So it's still used today in the world, maybe in different forms, so it's in your textbook. Now, one of the last mathematician we'll talk about today is another amazing mathematician and scientist, Archimedes. Archimedes is the one who ran around the street when he discovered buoyancy, shouting, "Eureka!" One thing he did is he figured out that the area of a circle is proportional to the radius squared. Then he said, well, what's this factor pi? So he used something called the method of exhaustion, where he kept drawing polygons that had more and more sides to make that little space between the two smaller and smaller, and he approximated pi to the thousandth place. He also found that the volume of the sphere is 1/3 of the cylinder it occupies. Now remember, I mentioned buoyancy. He discovered that the force is equal to the weight of the water displaced, and used it to prove whether a crown was really made of gold or not. So again, our last great scientist, Archimedes.